Hello, everyone. We will regularly bring you stories you like. It was a memorable day. I can assure you that by all accounts, it was a typical Saturday night supper. Even young Ava was there to spend the weekend with us, as she frequently does. Ava's mother, Amelia, was a widow who worked weekends as a cab controller. Ava and our daughter Orderly were closest friends in high school and had frequent sleepovers. Ava stayed with us on Fridays and Saturdays, while her mother worked 12-hour night shifts. My ex-wife Chloe knew Dora well, but I'd never met her. Chloe feared, and Dora would turn my head, so we never crossed paths. I traveled a lot for work and then attempted to break into a crowded market. Chloe normally took care of the children, and Ava was taken up by any available cab on Sundays. Ava and Orderly both enjoyed the snacks delivered by the cab drivers. Now back to the infamous Saturday night supper. The four of us were eating when Chloe unexpectedly declared, "Pete, I want a divorce. I am leaving you." She spoke as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell. When your 10-year-old wife unexpectedly announces that she wants a divorce, your initial emotion is shock. I stated that I desire a divorce. I've discovered someone else and want to spend the rest of my life with him. We had 2 8-year-old girls at the table, including our daughter. I maintained my composure. I was proud of my self-control. I must have said something dumb. "So if that's the case, I'm going apartment hunting tomorrow." Chloe said, "No, you will have to keep the house. You'll need it to be orderly." I stopped pretending to eat and focused on Chloe. "We're on a tour around the world, and Orderly cannot miss her lessons," she said, not looking up. "You have got to be kidding me," I replied louder than I had intended. Trying to be calm for the girls, Chloe probably chose this moment because she knew I'd hold back in front of the kids. I want to explore the globe while I am still young enough to appreciate it. She remarked, unaware of the irony. When we initially met, I was enthusiastic about traveling. I intended to explore the world after finishing my engineering degree and mentioned visiting the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, Rock, and New Zealand. Chloe, however, stated that she wanted to have children first. I'm still young enough to enjoy them. Is this irony? Or what I felt I grasped Ma's stance? Her parents were elderly when she was born, so she wanted to tour the world. When the children were grown, apparently she changed her mind. Taking care of Orderly was not as enjoyable as she had anticipated. The pregnancy and birth were painful, so she discarded the notion of having further children without any debate. I almost broke down, but I couldn't laugh out loud. Instead, I got up and began pruning the roses in my garden. After a time, I spotted Ava and Orderly gently assisting the girls watch out for thorns. "You are not wearing gardening gloves, as I warned. Be careful, Dad." Orderly answered, "What your mother doing?" I asked. "She's upstairs packing." Orderly spoke calmly. I was outraged, but I didn't want to ruin the roses. I saw the females and resisted the temptation to approach Chloe. How could any mother, particularly my wife, do this to her child? "Sorry, Orderly," I replied. "Why, Daddy?" "You did not abandon us. Mum did." She responded, "Most of the kids at school have fathers who have departed. I'd rather stay with a father who loves me than with a mother who didn't finish her education," and I'm still wondering what she meant. Chloe always appeared to be a devoted mother. Was there something I didn't notice? I noticed the girls were holding hands and working on the same rose shrub. I could hear Chloe talking on the phone, most likely to her new man ice cream. I announced, "Let's get the biggest ice cream we can find." Gals, they cheered, and we went to a restaurant on Sundays. They waited a while to eat, giving me time to ponder Marg's news and the repercussions. Surprisingly, I didn't mind that Chloe was leaving. Any feelings I had for her vanished with her declaration. My first concern was childcare. I could take care of myself, but I required assistance with school and holidays. My employers would have been helpful, but employment hours conflicted with education hours. I understood Ava's mother would have to deal with her own issues while I handled mine. I assumed I'd have to phone my sister Carol later to explain the issue. My only goal was to ask if Carol could pick up Orderly from school. Despite the long drive, I called Carol looking for a solution. "What did she do?" Carol yelled, as I hastily described Marg's statement, attempting not to go into detail in front of the girls. I realized I knew so little about Marg's affair. Carol Chloe took off with a guy and abandoned us. "Who, which guy?" Carol demanded. "I have no idea. Just some Casanova. I suppose his name is Ronald," stated the orderly. Ava said he's a library customer. Chloe had been working part-time at the library. I echoed their words to Carol. "My concern is that I don't know how to pick up from school in an orderly manner. Every day I can drop her off in the mornings, but I can't finish my work. By 2:30 it's fine. Daddy, Ava's mother, is picking me up." Orderly stated that it would be unfair to expect her to do it every day. I responded, "That will not be an issue we have thought of. Everything clearly described. Ava will stay with us on weekends, while I will stay with Ava and her mother during the week on Mondays. You can drive us to school, and Ava's mother will pick us up." Carol overheard and said, "Pete, I believe it's a wonderful plan. Have you asked her?" "I have never met Ava's mother. I had no notion whether she'd consent. The taxi driver has been begging my mother to work on Sundays." Ava joined in. Mum stated that she would earn more money working Sundays, but she did not want to impose on the orderlies. "Mum, the children have solved your DDMA. How does Ava's mother look like?" "I have no idea. I have never met her, so you should go chat to her soon and see what she thinks about the proposal." Carol then said, "Has Chloe moved out?" "Yet. I have no idea. We're in a restaurant. I believe she was packing when we left to purchase some new door locks while you're in town. Call me if you need anything tonight. Frank and I can come over if you like, but we'll need to bring the kids." "Thank you, Carol, but I do not believe it will be necessary. The assistance I require is right here with me." The females giggled at each other and then at me. Carol was not surprised nor unhappy that Chloe was leaving. They were never close after enjoying our ice cream. We returned to the car. I had to advise Ava's mother that I would be the only adult with the girls that evening and ensure that she was fine with it. There are some odd people these days, and I had yet to meet Ava's mother. I drove up outside the taxi office and walked inside to fetch Ava's mother, leaving the girls in the car. "I'm Peter Thomas. I am seeking for Ava's mother." I spoke to the cab driver behind the counter. I faintly recall him from a Sunday pickup. Surprisingly, I did not know Ava's mother's genuine name. We always referred to her as Ava's mother, and Ava called her Mum. The cabbie pointed to a door labelled Ladies, only with a paper reading in Dora's office. The other cab drivers in the office became silent, concentrating on the television. Dora entered after what appeared to be a long wait. She was lovely, dressed simply in tight pants and a top, but looking like a runway model. "Dora, too," the cabbie remarked. "There's a guy here to see you." "Hello, Peter. Is there something wrong?" she inquired, smiling but slightly concerned. "Yeah, no, okay." Maybe I responded uncomfortably. "Ava is well, I just need to speak quietly." The cab driver started to depart, but Endora begged them to stay, so we went outside. "What is up?" "Peter." Endora waved at the girls and in the car and added, "You don't look too good." Chloe left me, and I stammered. It seemed awkward talking to Endora for the first time, especially when she recognized me. My God, poor thing. She reacted and then remarked, "Does this mean we have a childcare issue tonight?" "No, Endora. I simply wanted to let you know that I will be watching the kids alone tonight. We've never met, but I felt you should know." "Not very much. Ava mentions you frequently. She treats you like a surrogate parent and keeps a picture of you by her bed. My God, where did she obtain those? I think Orderly gave it to her. Do you want me to take the day off with the girls? No, no. I simply wanted you to know that I am okay, looking after Ava. I'm confident Ava is in good hands. Peter, she said, grasping my hand, I will come and grab Ava in the morning. No, you should get some sleep. Maybe stop by tomorrow to talk about the future if you prefer. I can bring Ava home. Yes, the future, Endora said, appearing anxious. Do not worry, we can work something out. The girls have many of ideas. I smiled. Amelia appeared relieved. Thank you. Yes, I suppose that's the way it is. I will meet you tomorrow night. Do not worry about Ava. She is lovely. Amelia kissed the girls goodbye and instructed them to behave. When we arrived at the residence, an unusual car was parked in the driveway. Chloe came out as I drove to the curb. Where have you been? I have been waiting for hours, Chloe demanded curtly. Informed us she was going. Despite the earlier revelation, her behavior was unfamiliar to me. If that's who I believe it is, tell him to move his car before I move it for him. I snapped, annoyed that she was there with her new guy. Chloe nodded, and the Jaguar roared. Moving across the street, I ignored her and reversed into the area where the Jaguar had been. Chloe complained I nearly hit her. You're still here? I thought you'd departed? I low-hied and went to the front door. Are you not taking your car? I inquired. Noting that her Nissan was empty and the Jaguar was crammed, there's no point sell it. We flying out on Wednesday, she said. Where should I send my divorce papers? I thought, however, she had anticipated my response. Ronnie's lawyer address is on the kitchen table, she added curtly before speaking with Orderly and Ava. I hurried inside without waiting to hear the talk, and the girls followed me. They exchanged high fives, which I ignored. We spent a while watching television. I then sent the girls to bed. They left without arguing, which was a first for Orderly. I drank a few whiskies to help me sleep Sunday morning. I awoke to the aroma of frying bacon. For a time, I forgot Chloe had left and assumed she was making breakfast. Then I remembered the previous day. The room appeared different. Chloe had vanished completely. Even her parents' photos were absent. I walked to the bathroom, and her personal belongings were also gone on. It seems that someone had cleaned up while I was sleeping. Come on, Dad. Breakfast is becoming cold. Orderly called from the stairs in the kitchen. The girls insisted that I sit as they served breakfast fries, orange juice and coffee. Like a hotel, they had cornflakes juice and tea. I complimented their cooking, and they beamed. Carol Frank and her children arrived. Before we finished, the tranquility was disrupted, but the girls immediately poured Carol and Frank coffee. It took some convincing to get the girls to stop doing the dishes and go play with Carol's kids. Carol washed the dishes while Frank and I drank coffee and discussed the happenings of the day before they promised me that they would help in every way they could. Frank recommended a good divorce attorney. Carol prepared dinner from what was in the fridge, and I spent the majority of the day looking to my roses and occasionally conversing with them. Ava, an Orderly, assisted me with the roses in the afternoon, and she mentioned a line from the song, It's Been a Good Year for the Roses, which resonated with me, given the circumstances. Around 4:30 a cab pulled up or arrived. The girls let her in, and we became acquainted. Carol, Dora, and I reviewed the girls' babysitting plans, and Dora verified that she'd be working a Sunday night shift for a higher pay than her current position. We agreed on the idea, with minor changes and Carol's occasional assistance during school breaks. Dora called her boss to confirm the extra shift, and he immediately said, yes. She looked at me for confirmation, and I nodded. We realized Ava needed school clothing for the following day. Carol drove Amelia and Ava home to pick them up, with Orderly insisting on doing so. As I carried Ava's bag inside, I asked Endora if she drove. Yeah, but since Tony left, I can't afford a car. She said. How about using the Micra? I asked. Pointing at Mark, car I can't. She replied, why not? She and you ED me to get rid of it. You'll need it to drive safely to and from school. Are you certain? She asked. Yes, let us contact the insurance company and add you as a driver. I insisted we will deal with Marg's insurance separately. His name is Ronald Dad. I was corrected in an orderly manner. Who cares? He's Ronald the Rat to me, I said sharply. She insisted that he's funny and cute, referring to a TV puppet character. I relented with a smile. Okay. Ron the Rat. We settled into our new routine over the next few weeks. Carol and Frank were frequent visitors on Saturdays, checking the pantry and occasionally cooking lunch. Although housework was not my strong suit, I managed to keep things in order. Carol never complained. The weekdays were lonely, but I adjusted. Fridays were my favorite days because I got to see Endora and the girls. Endora frequently cooked for us before her Friday night shift. The most difficult times were coming home to an empty house and waking up alone, dealing with resentment toward Chloe. After years of marriage, waking up alone every morning took some time to adjust. There were complications in the divorce. Chloe and her new man had left the country and traveled extensively, making it difficult for her attorney to contact her. I discovered that his ex-wife was demanding child support and had blocked his UK accounts. I assisted by informing her attorney about Ma's whereabouts whenever she called Orderly. Orderly deserves credit for obtaining and relaying that information to me. I'm not sure if Orderly knew why I needed the information. The difficulties Chloe's attorney encountered worked in my favor at a court hearing. Chloe's solicitor requested another adjournment, claiming he was waiting to hear from her. The judge was frustrated and asked if I knew where Chloe was. I apologize, sir. I responded, standing up. I have not spoken with my wife since she left us. I did not mention Chloe's calls to Orderly every 3 weeks because the judge did not inquire about them. The judge cited Ma's unreasonable behavior in not communicating with her attorney and suggested that I had grounds for desertion. He granted my divorce and gave me complete custody of Orderly. I'm not sure how joint custody can work if Mrs. Thomas is unable to communicate with her attorney. He said, Mr. Thomas, I grant you full custody and terminate Mrs. Thomas's parental rights. Under one condition, he instructed Chloe's attorney to inform her that she had 21 days to appear in court if she wanted to contest. The judge approached me again. It surprises me that you have not demanded child support from your wife. Frankly, Your Honor, I don't see much chance of collecting it unless Marjorie returns to the country. I responded. The judge ordered a nominal 100 monthly support, which I doubted I would ever receive. However, this sets a precedent. He advised my legal representatives to check any assets Chloe may have in the UK. I walked out of court as a single man with full custody of the Orderly and rights to any property Chloe owned in the country. I never bothered to search for it on Monday. I saw an international call in the record from the day before, most likely from Marjorie Orderly, and Ava made no mention of the call or Chloe's location, which was uncommon. I figured it out, but didn't dwell on it. Chloe's requests to be more tidy grew less frequent as we focused on our new routine. I wasn't shocked. They were one-sided, aside from Orderly's subtle questions regarding Chloe's location, which halted once her boyfriend's divorce was completed. Somehow Orderly and Ava learned about it, possibly through school ties. The divorce was finalized around 4 months ago. One Saturday, while viewing a movie and having burgers, Ava said she and her mother might move soon, owing to a rent rise. I didn't realize this was part of a wider scheme. It came that the girls had conspired to have Endora and Ava move in with us at dinner one Friday. Orderly casually asked Endora if she found an apartment, yet Ava then fabricated terrible stories about their hunt. Orderly advised, "We have a spare room. Why don't Ava and an Amelia move in with us?" I felt Orderly's notion made sense. Endora's rent will be saved, and we will spend less time rushing about. I looked to Endora for her opinions, but she avoided making eye contact. I didn't want to reject the proposal outright or put Endora in an embarrassing situation. So I tried to be cautious sometimes. People have the wrong impression about a guy and a woman living together. I said. Amelia laughed. "She is Pete. You sound like Odie. I was just thinking about your reputation." "My reputation? You are fooling me. I've already heard stories at my apartment. Because I travel every weekend and drive a new automobile, people believe I am doing something else. You are kidding." I said no. They even contacted my landlord. I told them I worked for a taxi firm, but the rumors remain. You should get out of there, I understand, but finding an affordable apartment is difficult. What about the Orderly's idea? There's lots of space. Yeah, you're correct. Without the girls, this establishment resembles a morgue, and you are not a lousy cook. Should I consider this as a compliment? Yes, Endora. The room is yours. If you want it, the girls appear excited. We'll need to talk about the rent. Endora, there's no necessity. I don't enjoy housework, and you are a better cook. Maybe you'll do the cooking here. I would pay for the utilities and housework. Endora insisted. We'll talk about that later. Are you certain you want to move in? If you invite us, we would gladly accept. Then it's settled. When would you like to move in? Our unit is already equipped. Do not worry. The vast majority of my belongings are disposable. I sold the good items years ago when Tony departed because I needed money, so we agreed. Dora and Ava moved in with Orderly and I. What happened? I asked Endora, but her expression indicated me she would explain later. When the kids were not present, I heard her husband had died in a traffic accident years before, but I didn't know the specifics later. When I walked through the entrance to the car, I heard a distinct slap and noticed Orderly and Ava looking innocent. Dora and Ava moved in the next week. The majority of Amelia's furniture was discarded, but some got it inside the house while others were stored in the garage. And the TV and music center wound up in the girls' room. The place seemed like home again, and my attitude improved significantly. I stopped going out for drinks after work because I had bedtime stories to read to my two girls. Marg's departure marked the end of my trip day. My supervisor began sending people on trips while I stayed home shortly after Endora moved in. I started to fall for her. I attempted to disguise it. Endora, a year younger than me, was usually immaculately dressed and had a terrific sense of humor. She never resented either the daughters or myself. They even tolerated my peculiarities. I knew I loved her from the moment I met her. Carol observed. First, that Christmas, while arranging the table with Carol, she questioned, "Have you told her what you're in love with her? You fool." Carol said, "Don't be silly, Carol. Pete, I could read you like a book. You're more attached to Endora than you were to Stephanie Mathers." Stephanie Mathers, my high school crush, crushed my heart. Carol and her pals had helped me forget her. I'm linked to Dora, but I don't want to disrupt the equilibrium. I told you, Peter, that she likes you as much as you. Enjoy her. You two act like school children in love. What do you mean? You both avoid touching one another. Either you dislike each other, which I doubt, or you are in love. So do you believe Endora likes me? Yes, Peter. She is as smitten as you are. Even the girls can see it. What shall I do? Let her know how you feel? You've already charmed women. Chloe was different. You never liked Chloe. Right, no, I did not trust her. She'd got you wrapped around her finger, but those two tiny girls adore you. something I never suspected Chloe did. Chloe adored me when we were married. Think about what you desire. Pete, now there is a woman in the kitchen who loves you. Find a way to melt the ice. Dora walked in to check on dinner preparations just as our chats were getting started, causing Carol and me to shift the subject. Carol continued to give me meaningful looks and shared a secret joke with Orderly and Ava. Over the next 3 days I considered bringing up Endora several times, but always hesitated. Endora had to work on New Year's Eve, so Carol and Frank took the girls so I could go to a party with my office mates. Reluctantly, I agreed. Around 4 a.m. the party concluded. I dialed a cab, and Dora answered, "Hello, lovely. Could you please send one of the guys to take me home?" I slurred, "Are you mad?" "Pete?" Dora said I had trouble deciding which phone to call. I joked, "Try not to throw up in the car." She laughed as she issued the warning. Phil, the driver, arrived and helped me get into the cab as we drove. I realized we were not going to my house. You were going the wrong way. I mumbled, "You need someone to put you to bed, but it won't be me. I believe I know who will volunteer." Phil responded, "I must have gone asleep," because the next thing I knew, Phil and Dora were assisting me out of the car, with Dora clutching my arm and guiding me to the door. Phil assisted me upstairs, and Endora began adjusting my garments to make me more comfortable. Intoxicated, I saw this as an excellent opportunity. Amelia bent over me and I mumbled, "You know you're one hell of an attractive little Endora. What does this mean?" She asked that you are fit to eat, and I am starving. I smirked while slurring. "How much have you drunk?" She asked. "Not enough, Jesus." "Pete, you're as drunk as a newt." "Yeah, but if I drank a little more, I'd have the confidence to tell you how much I adore you." I confessed, "I'll believe it if you tell me sober." Amelia smiled as she stated, "Now, get some sleep, and we'll see how you feel in the morning." She moved to leave, but I grabbed her arm and gently pulled her onto the bed alongside me. She didn't try to get up, and I quickly dozed the next morning. The sunlight made my hangover worse. I was disappointed to find Endora no longer alongside me. I attempted to elevate my head and groaned in pain. "Please have a drink." I heard Amelia's voice behind me. "What is it?" I asked. "Protecting my eyes from the sun. It cannot be poisoned till you marry me. I need life insurance for you first." She laughed. "How do you know I'm not going to bump you off first?" I responded, attempting to be clever. "You cannot. You have 2 girls to look after." She replied with a smirk. "One of these is yours." I reminded her. "They regard themselves as sisters, and you as their father." She observed, "And you're like Orderly now, Mother. She's called me Mom a few times lately." I added, "I hadn't noticed." She said, sounding shocked, "Ava has been calling you Daddy for a month now." I informed her, "Really did." She inquired, surprised. "Yes." Carol and Frank also observed. I confirmed. "Did you talk about it with Carol on Boxing Day?" She inquired. I responded after having a lengthy discussion with Carol. "Is she already preparing her wedding attire?" I joked. Despite my hangover, Dora sat holding the drink she prepared for me, appearing perplexed. "So will you marry me or not?" I asked. Breaking the silence, "You did not ask me," she pointed out. "I wanted to know your response before I asked. It's less awkward if I'm rejected." I explained. "You would not appear foolish if you asked." She responded wisely, but I prompted. "But I've got a confession. I am not a widow. Tony is not dead." She stated that legally she had never married him. I am confused. I admitted. Tony was a bigamist. He was already married when he married me, so our marriage is null and void. She stated, "Wow, so you aren't a widow and have never married?" I clarified, "Yes, it's easy to tell everyone I'm a widow." She acknowledged. "In that case, please do me the honor of," I began, but we became distracted and spent the next hour kissing and hugging, nearly forgetting my headache. Frank had brought the girls home around 3:00 p.m. Andor and I were in the kitchen planning how to tell the girls, and they seemed to understand right away, probably because Andor was nearly sitting on my lap. They hugged both of us when Frank entered. He said, "Congratulations." We set a date for mid-February and planned a modest celebration, but the girls wanted something more extravagant. We decided on an average-sized event with the wedding at the registry office and a small reception after we didn't have many living relatives, and the registry office have avoided the complications of public announcements, keeping things simple for Andor, who was supposed to be a widow after Frank left and had the delicate task of submitting her resignation to the taxi company's supervisor. She refused to work night shifts due to personal preferences, which annoyed me because I disliked sleeping alone. We decided to sleep in separate bedrooms until the wedding, to set a good example for the girls in terms of extramarital lovemaking still. Once the girls returned to school, I made it a habit to come home for long lunches, which significantly improved my mood. The following weekend, she worked her final shifts at the taxi depot, bringing home numerous flowers and chocolates from her colleagues. On Sunday night, several drivers and their wives invited us to dinner and entertainment at a local pub, making taxis scarce in town. The wedding took place quickly and smoothly. Our girls were ideal bridesmaids, and they looked stunning. We spent one night in the honeymoon suite of the luxury hotel where we held the reception. While Frank and Carol drove the girls home, we planned to spend the majority of the school summer vacation traveling with the girls. That first year, we spent 5 weeks driving around Florida, the Caribbean and Southern California, seeing and experiencing everything we could. When I returned home from work about a week or two after the wedding, I noticed something was wrong. The girls were happy, but they appeared upset after they went to bed. She told me what bothered her, as Ava, "No, Tony is not dead," or asked, how did she know I was surprised, because we had never discussed it with the girls, or explained that they frequently kept pictures of Marjorie and Tony in their drawers. When asked why, Ava replied, "They don't need us. We do not want to look at their pictures." Ava knew her father had not died in a traffic accident, but had fled, though she didn't know why, and chose not to elaborate to avoid admitting Ava was technically illegitimate. Surprisingly, Ava didn't seem bothered by the truth, which I believe helped the girls bond and all made her an excellent wife and mother. She remained patient with the kids and me even when things got hectic at work. Despite my flaws, he never mentioned them and had a great sense of humor, frequently teasing me. Playfully, our nights, while sometimes tiring, were full of love and laughter. By early summer, Marjorie's calls to Orderly had almost stopped. Orderly, who was angry at her mother, became more persistent when Marjorie did call, and I had to reprimand her for calling Andor, knowing Mommy. During these conversations, Orderly switched tactics and discussed our family activities, referring to Andor as Daddy's wife, and Ava as my sister. We discussed appropriate behavior, but realized we couldn't list all of the words and phrases to avoid. Chloe had to deal with the consequences of her actions before our vacation ended, and Orderly and Ava began to question whether we were truly present Mom and Dad. They left printouts of adoption procedures around the house, implying that they were adopting Orderly and I was adopting Ava. They even discovered forms for changing Ava's name to Thomas after discussing, and I chose to pursue both adoptions. Despite his absence, Ava's father retained legal rights. Our divorce attorney handled the process. After more than a year, we finally terminated Tony's parental rights and completed the adoptions. Tony's termination was presided over by the same judge who heard my divorce case. We legally became Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, together with our daughters, Orderly and Ava. We pondered having more but decided against it. Following our marriage, I received a promotion that provided a higher income and increased delegation. Our summer travels became regular, making up for my lack of travel. Earlier in life, in our second year, we spent 5 weeks in Europe, 3 in India and Sri Lanka, and 4 in Australia and New Zealand. By the 5th summer, Orderly and Ava, both 14, documented our travels with video cameras. We planned a trip to Canada, the northern US, and Alaska, with the girls making detailed plans. About 2 years after our marriage, Marjorie started sending us Christmas cards, though we couldn't reply because they lacked a return address. The cards included Canadian stamps, suggesting Marjorie and Ronald had settled there. Chloe was rarely discussed, and she hadn't called Orderly in years, so no one brought it up as usual. Our master plan for the extended summer vacation changed when the children pointed out we couldn't visit all the preferred destinations within the available time. Even after major concessions, we opted to split our vacation, focusing on the West that summer and saving the East. For another year, we arrived in Winnipeg on an Air Canada flight in late June, spending a day or two seeing the city's historic landmarks. For Manitoba, we went west to Saskatchewan, then south through the DTAs Nebraska and Kansas, before going west and north again into Colorado and Wyoming, where we stopped at a dude ranch. While the horses were comfortable to ride, I favored English saddles over Western saddles because I felt less confident in getting out of them if something went wrong. There are 2 perspectives on riding horses or motorcycles: stay with it and try to regain control, or back off and hope to continue safely. The thought of riding a horse or motorcycle with a spinning back wheel has never appealed to me. We ultimately arrived in Montana and stopped in a town I'd always wanted to visit and had most likely heard about. In a Western, after checking into our motel, we went to a neighboring diner. The cafe was full and noisy, but then there was a tremendous crash, followed by silence, as a waitress dropped a tray of food and drinks, and like everyone else, I looked to see who dropped the tray. To my astonishment, I identified the culprit. She also recognized me, which most likely led to her dropping the tray. The poor woman stood there astonished, staring directly at me, and I recognized her, and we both replied by saying practically identical things to our girls: eat your meal, Ava, Orderly, there is nothing to worry about, or I reassured the girls, each addressing their own adoptive daughter, despite adopting each other's children. 5 years ago, we still preferred to discipline our own children. First, both girls were trying to catch a peek of the commotions, but an Orderly instantly recognized the woman and murmured, "So be it," before returning to her dinner. Ava stared a little longer, then looked at me, smiled, glanced at her mother, and continued eating in sequence. The other diners, recognizing the incident was about us, stared, but we ignored them and finished our lunch. I assumed the grass wasn't as green as it appeared, or whispered as we walked to the car with the girls. "What do you mean?" I inquired quite curtly. "If she works here, she's probably no longer with Ronald. One of them likely cheated, or explained a cheater who has cheated before will continue to cheat. But she did not cheat on you. She dumped you in the Orderly. Leaving her daughter is like cheating." I replied that either she or he couldn't stay faithful. "Does it matter?" or asked only if she starts causing trouble. "Now Orderly has gone through enough," I replied. "Strong. It's too late for her to start problems. Orderly handled things better than you did. After all the females or started, do not mention that I know what the females did. I'm pleased. We have such skilled little manipulators. I'm just curious how far their intentions go." I interrupted. "What do you mean?" or asked, confused. "Nothing significant. Just that they appear to be following a strategy. Sometimes I wonder how far ahead they planned. Everything amused. Do not worry. I'm extremely happy with the way things are. I'm just inquisitive sometimes." All spoke reassuringly. We got to the car, and I unlocked the doors with the remote. The children jumped into the rear seats. I opened the front door for Endora, but she didn't enter. Instead, she approached me, placed her arms around my neck, and kissed me. The girls in the rear muttered and shouted approval, saying things like, "Not in public," and "Wait until you're in your room." Despite their joking remarks, both were mature for their age given their challenging backgrounds. Dora's husband died when Ava was 6. When she was 8 years old, an orderly mother abandoned us. Andor abruptly interrupted the kiss. "We have an audience," she said quietly, gazing over my shoulder. I noticed Marguerite standing in the kitchen doorway observing us. "Do you believe orderly should be discontinued or suggested?" "Yeah, I don't believe we have an option," I responded. I knew I'd have to address Marjorie later and arranged for orderly to meet her mother alone, so we all leaned against the car and talked, while I pondered. "Your mother is there? I believe you should go see her or tell her, do I have to?" Orderly responded, "She is your mother. You may come to regret passing up this opportunity years later." Orderly shrugged and reluctantly got out of the automobile. "I do not want to see her. Maybe Ava will join me." "No, we will be right here," assured Andor orderly with hesitation and a few glances back at us. She walked toward her mother, halting around 10 ft away. Chloe murmured something we couldn't hear and stepped forward. However, orderly instantly stepped back, even though their talk appeared to be orderly. It was annoying not to be able to hear it. Did the majority of the talking. If Chloe came close, orderly retreated. Lando whispered, "That's not good, apparently." So I responded orderly, quickly turned and hurried back to the car, jumping in, slamming the door, and fastening your seatbelt. Marjorie had disappeared from the doorway. I wanted to leave, but Dora had other intentions, and she was already halfway out the door when orderly finished tightening her seatbelt. I waited around 10 minutes for Endora to return. I gave her a perplexed look as she climbed into the car. She looked at the girls in the back seat and gave me a look that screamed, "Stop talking and drive. We'll talk about this later." After lunch, we intended to walk along the river route to visit the waterfalls that inspired the town's name. We assumed the hydroelectric dams had lost their original luster, yet they were still stunning Endora, and I never go too far on these hikes, as we always do, if we can avoid it. 2 girls went ahead, allowing Endora and myself a chance to speak. So what was she saying? He dumped her 2 years ago for a waitress in this town, as we suspected, but I'm curious why she didn't go back to the UK. He left her with the lodging. Bill, the motel, required assistance in the restaurant, so she stayed to work off the bill. She shares a room with another woman. They work in the restaurant during the day and serve beverages at the bar at night. This sounds like fun. What else should she do? Pete probably gets laid every night by a barfly. There's no need to be nasty. Marjorie made a mistake, and now she's facing the consequences. You'll meet her when she finishes her shift at the restaurant at 6:03. She only has a few hours till her bar shift, so you can talk while I take the kids out for a bite, Dora. What the hell should I tell her? I inquired, frustrated. You must finish, Peter. Regardless of what you believe, you should sit down and talk to her. Remember, she is an orderly mother. Do you hope she remembered that Marjorie said the same thing and encouraged her to keep her tone calm but firm? Peter, she regrets her conduct and wishes to apologize to Orderly and you. But I don't think Orderly is ready to accept it yet. That was evident at lunch, but I'm confident she will. Endora continued, We just need to make sure we don't lose her again. Gentle, are you being generous about this, given what Tony did to you? I inquired, suspicious. Pete, what is the point of living a life filled with hatred? What Tony did to me was worse than what Chloe did to you, or Orderly. For a while I despised him. He also fooled the other women into marrying him. Then one day, while we sat in the police station's waiting room, I realized we were all in the same boat. We had all been duped, and we are not to blame. So we became buddies. Tony, what's the purpose in cursing? If he turns up, I will denounce him to the police, but I won't waste time hating him. I have more important folks to care about. Dora said this with sincerity, hugging me close and kissing my cheek. Also think about it. What would his name have been if Marjorie hadn't taken it? Where would we be today? She added, excellent concept in Dora. I relented. I understand, my love. We had best hurry. It's 4 now, she said. Looking at the time, I was waiting in the restaurant parking lot. When Chloe came off duty, she emerged with another dark-haired woman who examined me before proceeding. Did Chloe appear nervous? Not like the confident woman I last saw in the kitchen, enforcing the rules all those years ago. She still appeared attractive. Though, hello, Peter. Thank you for attending. Marjorie greeted me with a tentative voice. The bar should be quiet now. Why don't we go there to talk? I did not answer, but motioned for her to take the initiative. I followed Marjorie to a booth in the back of the bar. It was evident that we were expecting. I observed the dark-haired woman behind the bar talking to the bartender, and all of the booths next to us were empty. The dark-haired woman stepped over, set 2 beers on the table, and spoke to Marjorie in Spanish. Marjorie nodded in response. I believed she picked up the language throughout her stay. Here, did you want to see me, Chloe? I reminded her that I had not asked for this meeting. I just wanted to say, sorry, Peter. She finally said. I just caught her words. No, you've done me a huge service, I responded. Come on. I am not cut out to be a bloodthirsty diplomat. Yes, Dora got the better end of the arrangement. Marjorie spoke harshly. I should have known she'd latch on to you as soon as I left, she said bitterly. It was the other way around, Marjorie. As soon as I laid eyes on Endora, I had no idea how to finish that sentence. Perhaps I imagined that if I had met Amelia before Marjorie departed, I would have been the one to go away. Maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but I doubt I would have done that. I'm too bound by responsibility and other obligations to act selfishly. Sometimes you worry if this is a failure, what happened to Lover Boy after all? I asked Marjorie, and where did the crook obtain all that money? He abandoned his wife and children without a penny. So she seized all of his financial accounts. Ronald has money. What a joke are you referring to? Everyone else's money. He was a thief. Peter. He is sought everywhere. I would not be surprised if it was the reason he left me. In the end, I assisted him with various scams, and we had to leave Argentina. Soon after my image appeared in the local press, I believe he crossed into Canada after learning that the FBI was looking for him at the motel, along with one of the diner's waitresses. Ironically, I now work as a waitress. Wasn't the FBI after you, I asked. Basically, sure, Chloe replied, but I struck a bargain with them. They agreed not to throw the book at me, provided I was willing to testify against Ronald. When he was caught in return, I received a slap on the wrist, 2 years probation for assisting a fugitive. I'm stuck in the country until they find him and have to report to the authorities once a week. However, it makes no difference, because Buster, the deputy sheriff to whom I report, is usually present or at the diner. Do you still have debt? I inquired. I was drowning in it. I signed over practically everything, including Ronald's rental car, and the woman drove away in it. I've almost paid it all off, but there's still a few thousand left. She said, no, Pete, I cannot. Chloe complained when she saw me take out my checkbook. For once in your life, Marjorie, do as you are instructed. I replied harshly, okay, I will write this for $5,000, approximately $10,000 that should bring you out of debt and provide you with a safety net if necessary. If you opt to return to the UK when he is apprehended, we will assist you in finding a place to stay and settling in. but don't assume you have the right to mess with our family. You are aware that the courts have deprived you of any parental powers to order, don't you? She made it apparent to me this morning. Marjorie confirmed. I apologize. That was not why we sent her. I explained. I discovered this when Andor entered the kitchen. Pete, I was stupid. I never intended to hurt you or Orderly like that. I was carried up in Ronald's thrilling story. It was not worth it. She confessed. I promise you, Marjorie, it was a long time ago. I'm just thankful you're secure and orderly, and now I've got a new life, and you are no longer a part of this, and I will endeavor to keep Orderly in touch with you. I replied strongly, that is more than I deserve. Peter, and I truly do not deserve this check. Marjorie said, shaking her head. So you best accept it. It will relieve my conscience little when we leave tomorrow morning. We'll stop by the diner for breakfast. Perhaps we can regain order and speak to you civil once more. I recommended I do not deserve your goodwill. Peter, she repeated, her voice trembling. No, Marjorie, I had to make my point, even though I tried to persuade myself otherwise, but it's your order. Please, Mother, and I can't do anything about it now, if you don't mind. I would like to return to my family. I said this while standing up. Sure, I apologize, Pete, she said quietly. I stood up and went away. Not looking back when I located the females, they were all waiting for me, breathless. I took Amelia's side and briefly explained my chat with Marjorie and the money I handed her. Amelia's sole response when I disclosed the check was, she doesn't deserve you. That's very much what she said. I replied while kissing my wife, but you want to say thank you. This was all she said in response to the remark. Later, I phoned Orderly alone and was about to begin the "you only have one birth mother's" routine when she told me Amelia and Ava had already come. The conversation did not continue. As anticipated, after that moment, Orderly stated that she would talk to her mother the next morning and try to keep her mouth shut. She said that she would not be alone with her mother and that Ava or I would need to be present. When I inquired why, Mum curtly explained that one of us was usually there at the burial. I didn't know what to say, so I left it at that. The following morning, Marjorie, Orderly, and Ava sat at a nearby table and talked for a long time. I can only presume Chloe's friends were covering for her because she most likely had work to do. Amelia and I overheard two kids bragging about how well the roses were blooming in their garden. As we drove away, they were all smiling for the most part. Marjorie approached the car and kissed both girls goodbye. She then looked at Andor and me. These two are extremely lucky. They've discovered the best mother and father in the world. She shouted this unexpectedly, taking me by surprise, before turning and running back inside the restaurant. I guess she cried while running. I kissed my wife. Then we hopped into our car and headed north to the Calgary border. I don't believe the kids were looking back or concerned that we had left this town behind based on how they looked in the rearview mirror. After we had gone home that year, Chloe maintained in touch with her Andor, wrote to her on a frequent basis. We never found out whether the FBI had located Ronald, but less than a year later, we learned that Marjorie was planning to marry her deputy sheriff, or whatever his name was. We convened a family reunion, and after much grief, we decided to decline Chloe's wedding invitation. However, I was able to sneak in there alone for a few days to attend. Do not ask me why, but I felt compelled to do it. Buster, or Buddy, as everyone nicknamed him, turned out to be a very pleasant person. Once I got to know him better, he even picked me up from the airport and introduced me to all of his friends and family. Buddy told me that Marjorie had always been honest and forthright with him. She accepted everything and expressed her regret for her previous behavior. Buddy had arranged for numerous of his trucker mates to send her Christmas cards, etc., from various cities in Canada. I feel Marjorie was attempting to conceal the truth about her situation. It's strange to gift your ex-wife at her wedding. but I suppose some idiot had to do it. Perhaps that is why I went to put an end to the situation. I don't think Orderly or Ava found out where I had gone for those 5 days, but they could have. In almost every situation, those two were one step ahead of me. To be honest, they and Amelia still exist. Over the next few years, we learned that Marjorie had given birth to 2 boys. We never saw them except in images. Now that they are a little older, I suppose the boys have more frequent contact with Orderly and Ava. However, neither of my daughters mentions them, or Marjorie to me very much Orderly, and Ava married 2 brothers. Sometimes I feel so awful for these poor girls. The females are still very close to each other and play a significant part in these marriages. When our 2 girls plot together, it takes a man to come out on top. I doubt I've ever been able to achieve that. They both have 2 children, which seems strange to me in both situations. The daughters were born very near to each other, both chronologically and physically, and I've adored watching our grandchildren grow up and become so much like their mothers. I retired as managing director last year, and Andor and I are currently on an 8-month round-the-world tour. We've been thinking about where we'd like to settle down, but to be honest, I believe our daughters and their families will lure us back to the UK. We haven't sold our house. The girls refuse to let us because of the roses. God knows how much time they spend there catering to everything. But we receive regular reports. Just this morning, while checking my email, I received a photo of my garden from them captioned, "It's been a good year for Rose's life carries on that." Here is the next story. If your wife left the house at 10 p.m., would you be concerned? I wouldn't be, because I only have to turn on the local news to see her. Carol Martin, my wife, co-hosts the nightly news on Birmingham's premier television station. She is both intelligent and gorgeous, and many anticipate her next job will be in a major area, such as Atlanta or Chicago. There's even discussion about a New York offer, the ultimate purpose of news anchors. I am Tom Bailey. Carol also retained her maiden name for broadcasting, as do many female announcers, in order to keep their personal and professional life separate. Can see how proud and fortunate I am to be her spouse. We met at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. She majored in radio while I studied marketing. We met at a freshman fraternity party, and I was immediately smitten. She was tall, blonde, and attractive. I was outgoing but not cut out to be an athlete or model. Despite this, we connected and became a couple. We had ups and downs, including a 2-week breakup. I missed her so badly, I dashed to her dorm, only to discover her running toward me. It was a movie similar to Moment, and we pledged never to part again. We were madly in love my senior year. We were engaged and lived together off campus. However, we waited till after graduation to marry. She wanted a large wedding and her family could afford it. We married in the Canterbury Chapel. 1 week after graduation, Carol earned a weekend weather anchor gig in Huntsville, which was not particularly prestigious, but it was a start. I got a low-level job at a local advertising agency to get experience. Carol's career swiftly accelerated within a year. She was offered a reporting position with Mobil's major station. We relocated to the Gulf Coast, where I secured a position with a large advertising business. Carol prospered, progressing from weekend newscaster to nightly news co-host. Her pregnancy announcement elevated her fame even further, and our daughter Susan's birth became a community event. The station created a documentary series about Carol's experience as a new mother returning to work, which won a regional Emmy. Her achievement resulted in a co-host offer from Birmingham's top station. Why we left our beloved Mobile in Birmingham, believing that it could lead to even greater chances. Carol's career took a great step forward when she moved to Birmingham, which has a population of 1.2 million and a large media market. I was wary about relocating to Birmingham after feeling so at ease in Mobile, but it turned out I had no cause for concern. I got a terrific job at the city's second-largest advertising agency, thanks to referrals from my Mobile pals and assistance from the Birmingham station. The station's management was terrific, connecting us with a professional real estate agent who helped us find a nice house in Hoover, as well as a great daycare for baby Susan. The transition went more smoothly than I imagined, and we adapted into our new lives fast. Our everyday routine is quite different, because being married to a television journalist is unusual. I get up, make breakfast, and leave to work, leaving Carol and Susan to sleep. Carol gets up with Susan and spends the morning together. After lunch, she transports Susan to Mrs. Olop's, a lovely lady who cares after Susan and a few other children, introducing them to concepts they'll face in kindergarten. I bring Susan up from work, cook dinner, and bathe her before reading to her and putting her to bed. Then I relax till Carol arrives home, which frequently wakes me up on the couch. Carol's schedule is tough. She arrived at the station about 3 p.m. to prepare for the evening at 6 p.m. The news goes on air and again at 10 p.m. Don Sanchez, the news director, has recently been convening post-mortem meetings following the late newscast, which has extended her stay. The rivalry for ratings is severe, and stations are continually looking to boost their viewer share as an advertising professional. I understand the emphasis on ratings, but as a husband, I miss having time alone with Carol. We both work long hours and frequently feel like neighbors rather than spouses, although we attempt to spend weekends together. It's difficult, especially given Carol's increased public appearances. Our SCHUAL are rarely compatible, making it tough to address our predicament. Carol seemed reluctant to discuss it because there are no simple solutions. When we married, we talked about these issues and I agreed to everything. Furthermore, many of our acquaintances have similar challenges with demanding professions. I tried to be helpful because I was aware of what I was entering into, and Carol's income makes our lives much easier, even though money isn't everything. Eventually, I couldn't keep my displeasure to myself. One day at lunch, I confided in Lou Faraday, our agency's media director. Lou, who is married and has a daughter slightly older than Susan, became my best buddy at work when he mentioned how happy he was with his family. I said, "Damn, I wish I had what you have. It looks like problems in paradise." Buddy Lou asked, "What's going on?" I poured out my emotions, surprised at how horrible I felt. "I'm married to one of the most talented women on television." I complained, but I see her as frequently as her fans do. Lou shook his head, sympathetically. "That's terrible, Tom. Can't you take a vacation or an extended weekend? Your family would love to keep Susan." "I thought about it," I said, "but Carol claims Don Sanchez is pressuring them to keep the ratings high. He's concerned that their absence may result in a dip from which they will be unable to recover." "Look," Lou responded, "I understand Don Sanchez is ambitious, but also decent. Maybe you should talk to him and ask if he can assist you and Carol spend time together." "I do not know Lou." I exhaled. "Carol would destroy me if she found out I spoke to her boss. She does not need to know." Lou stated that Don will be visiting the agency tomorrow to give a presentation. "You can capture him thereafter. I don't want to bring personal difficulties into work." I said, "Don't be silly. This is just a preliminary meeting. This is an excellent opportunity to talk to him." Carol arrived much later than usual that evening. She did not wake me up from my nap on the couch. I awoke in the middle of the night, dragged myself to bed next to her, and thought, "Now, we won't even get to kiss her properly," determined to break our habit. I kept an eye on the conference room the next day, and when their meeting concluded, I waved at Don. He was in a great mood. "Hello, Tom. How's my favorite news?" Anka's husband, he shouted. "Hey, Don. Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. "Sure, what is on your mind?" he inquired happily. "I need you to give Carol a break. Are you working her too hard?" I replied, frowning. He seemed anxious. "Did she complain?" "No, she likes it." I responded. "I am the one who suffers. I do not see her anymore." He relaxed and joked. "When you married her, did you know she had a hard job?" "True," I agreed. "However, all of these appearances and posto meetings have limited our time together." Okay, he replied. "We've probably overdone it. I'll see if we can free up her schedule. Don't worry about the postmortems. We haven't had one since the last ratings were released. Have you noticed how much we outranked the competition? Management is happy. I have to get to my next meeting. Keep pleasing your bride like that." He rubbed my back and then went back at my desk. I examined the ratings and noticed that the most recent set was uploaded a month ago if Don hadn't performed a post-mortem in a month. What was Carol doing when she arrived home so late? The concept shook me. I pondered if she was having an affair, but soon dismissed the idea. Carol loved me and would never jeopardize our marriage. There were numerous reasons she may be late, like catching up on fan correspondence or unwinding. But those explanations didn't help me feel any better at the time. Lou stuck his head inside. "Hey, I saw you talking to Donald. Did he offer you any relief?" "I am not sure, Lou. I suppose I won't know until I talk to Carol." He seemed bewildered, but when I didn't say anything else, he turned to leave. "Okay, buddy, let me know if there is anything I can do the remainder of the day." I felt like a zombie. I went through the motions, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I continued thinking about what Don had said and what Carol had told me about her late nights. I pondered addressing her, but I was afraid I'd look silly if the explanation was valid. Accusing her of having an affair would not improve our relationship. However, avoiding the issue felt. Weak by the time I left work to pick up Susan, I had not resolved anything. Fortunately, my 4-year-old demands kept me distracted for the evening. She was unusually clingy, sensing my mood, and refused to let me stop reading to her when she eventually fell asleep. I felt tears fill up in my eyes as I imagined how awful it would be if her parents divorced. Emotionally depleted, I watched television, but couldn't concentrate until the news came on. Watching Carol, I remembered how much I adored her and convinced myself she would never cheat. Carol arrived after midnight. "I didn't realize you were still awake," she replied. Surprised, I hugged her. "I just wanted to see you. You're very late tonight." She kissed me quickly and removed her shoes. "Yeah, sorry." Don held us up yet again with one of his autopsies. She said she was going to bed as she walked upstairs. I realized she was lying. Don mentioned that he hadn't held a session in a month. I didn't want to believe she was cheating, but neither did I want to ignore the truth. The next day I invited Lou to lunch with me. He understood my seriousness and agreed. We drove to a restaurant away from the office in silence. When we ordered, I was hesitant. Then Lou asked, "Isn't it Carol?" His words opened the floodgates, allowing me to express my fears and insecurities. Lou listened silently. "Damn, I thought you and Carol had the most wonderful marriage." Lou said. I too replied sadly. "So what are you planning to do?" He asked a question that clarified my thoughts. "Lou, I need to visit the saint and see for myself. If I'm mistaken and everything is fine, I'll sneak out undetected. Carol will never know. What if you were right?" Lou asked quietly. "I do not know, but at least I will know the truth. It is better than this." Agony. "What about Susan?" he asked. "I've already considered that," I told Lou. "When we get back, I'll call Mrs. Allop to see if she can keep Susan late tonight. She has offered before, so everything should be fine." We finished lunch and went back to the office still right, I felt relieved to have a plan. Even those facing execution feel relieved when the day arrives. Mrs. Allop agreed, but asked that I return by 11 p.m. I have work in the morning. She explained there wasn't much time, but it was the best I could do. So I promised after work. I informed Susan about the change. She cried at first, but cheered up when Mrs. Alsop mentioned the pizza party I paid for the extra time and pizza and left before Susan could become upset again. I went home, prepared dinner, but was unable to eat clean up. I tried distracting myself, but my doubts grew. The news would not conclude until 10:30 p.m. What if Carol came straight home? What do I say? These anxieties froze me until I remembered my resolution during lunch. I needed to do something by 10 p.m. I had resolved to go to the station. There would be few people there, an engineer to cameraman and sound technician. Hopefully I can go unnoticed when I arrived. I realized my error. Joe, the night watchman, was there. He recognized me, so getting in was not a problem, but I needed to sign in. So much for stealth. "Good evening, Mr. Bailey." Joe stated he came to see the news. I replied and signed the log. Joe looked at me kindly. "There will be no problem." "Right, no, absolutely not." I responded instantly and headed to the studio. What exactly did he mean? Did he know anything? I peered through the blackout curtains. Carol had just finished watching the news and was heading to the green room rather than her dressing room. The green room was gloomy, often designated for guests who never appear on the 10years news. Carol opened the door. A bulb inside illuminated a male figure. The door closed, and I was left outside. Heart is throbbing. Carol would never forgive me for breaking in, even if it was unintentional. If I stayed outdoors, I wouldn't know. I remembered Carol showing me a small observation window. I went there and checked the time. It was almost 10:45. I had to leave soon to pick up Susan. I looked through the glass and saw Carol in a passionate hug with a man. I took a video on my phone. The light highlighted her black lingerie against her skin. I wanted to stop it, but with time to pick up Susan, I dashed to the lobby, nodded to Joe, and walked out the door. "I apologize, Mr. Bailey." Joe said, "Damn, I thought is everyone except me aware of what is going on?" I rushed into the car and drove quickly to Mrs. Alsop's house. She allowed me in, and I discovered Susan sleeping, wrapped in a blanket. I took her up and thanked Mrs. Alsop for keeping her. She looked at me curiously and asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Bailey?" Only then did I notice that tears were flowing down my face. "It's nothing. I just got something in my eye," I said. I thanked her again. Susan was carried to her car and driven home. Susan remained unconscious when I brought her upstairs and put her to bed. She appeared so nice and innocent, and I wished for the innocence I'd lost tonight. I grabbed a drink from the refrigerator and sat in the dark, waiting. Everything was calm, and the image of my grandmother's death raced across my head. My melancholy made the quiet even more intense. Carol arrived home around 1 a.m. She switched on the kitchen light and noticed me seated there. "Tom, what are you doing?" she inquired, astonished. "I had been waiting for you," I responded evenly. "The security officer informed me that you had visited the studio. Is everything fine with Susan?" "Where is she?" Carol inquired. "Mrs. Alsop saved her for me. She's sleeping upstairs," I responded. "So since you came to the studio, why didn't you visit my office?" she inquired, her tone tinted with confusion. I steadied myself. This was it. "I saw you tonight. I saw you enter the green room with Ted Stevenson." I spoke, my voice wavering slightly. "We just had a meeting following the news," she responded calmly. "Carol." I gazed through the observation window. "I understood what your meeting was about. I've even seen your new lingerie," I said, observing, as she looked humiliated. "Tom, I'm deeply sorry. she said quietly. Are you sorry? You did it, or simply sorry you were caught? I demanded. My frustration is mounting. I am sorry you found out this way, she said gently, averting my look. Are you leaving me for him? I inquired, feeling a lump rise in my throat. She sank to her knees and grabbed my hands. No, honey, I will not leave you. This is only a fling. Maybe it'll be over soon, and everything will return to normal. She whispered words that shocked me. You aren't going to quit? Are you going to continue cheating on me? I asked in disbelief. It means nothing. Just let me have my pleasure, and I'll get back to you, she said with a contemptuous tone. I cannot believe this. You want me to accept to be a betrayed man? I shouted, unable to control my rage. She stood up and stared at me coldly. Tom, do you really have nothing to say? She spoke bluntly. I am your husband. If you do not stop, I will file for divorce. I threatened, hoping to make her understand the gravity of the issue. She stared at me with a chilly, calculated face. I don't think that's in your best interest, Tom. You will lose custody of Susan and the majority of our assets. They will not be concerned with the incident. They'll prioritize Susan's well-being, and I'll be given custody. She explained plainly that you will only see her on weekends and select holidays. Wait, are you the one committing infidelity? I protested, as the situation slipped farther out of my grasp. This is a faultless situation. Tom, the court will not care if you don't trust me. Ask a lawyer. She spoke with finality that chilled me. I do not want this to happen. Tom, I want our family to remain united. This emotion should not disturb us. Just think about it, she added, kissing my head before retiring to bed. I sat there overwhelmed by rage, sorrow, sadness, and confusion. Carol cheating on me was unimaginable, and her suggestion of continuing the affair was beyond comprehension. Finally, I dragged myself to bed and fell asleep. Almost quickly tired from the night's events, even though I was exhausted, I got up at 6 eager the next morning. I took a shower, shaved and dressed. Mechanically, wild ideas raced through my mind. Run away, stir Carol up, kidnap Susan, or never get out of bed again. But seeing Susan asleep, I knew I had to be strong, for her doing something dumb would just make me lose her. I have to put her first, so I finished my morning chores and went to work on autopilot. Tom Lou asked, "Are you okay?" When I didn't respond, he entered and closed the door. "What is wrong?" he asked. I told him everything from last night. Lou listened, stunned by Carol's demeanor. "Damn it." He said she expected you to put up with her infidelity. He stared me in the eyes. "Carol has changed. You cannot rely on her anymore. You have to look out for yourself. The first thing you should do is contact an attorney. You need to learn about your rights." "Hell, Lou," I responded. "I do not know any lawyers in Birmingham. This is where I can help." He replied with a smile. "My college roommate is a lawyer here. I will call him." He reappeared a little later, holding a piece of paper. "You've got an appointment at 1 p.m. today. Here is his name and address." "Thank you, Lou. At the very least, it offers me something to do," I replied gratefully. "Not an issue when you meet him. Please come back and tell me what he said." He stated that the meeting with the lawyer was discouraging. He listened to my story and then emphasized that in a no-fault situation, the court does not care who did what. It solely makes decisions regarding property division and child welfare. What does this mean for me? I asked. In short, Carol will be placed in custody unless she is deemed unfit. You'll have visiting rights, but Susan will stay with her. You will pay child support, even though Carol earns more. He stated the facts plainly, and the house, I asked, hoping for some positive news. It is shared property, but the court prefers that the children stay in the residence. Carol is likely to keep it until Susan is 18, then you may sell it and divide the equity, he said. But what if she relocates to another market? I objected. Then you can sell your residence. Until then it stays put, he clarified. I shook my head in defeat. Damn that she knew exactly what she was talking about. I am screwed, I mumbled. I apologized. He added as we clasped hands, it is not always equitable, but that is the law driving back. I felt as if I were being punished for a transgression I had not committed. Lou saw my expression and understood the conclusion. Damn it, Lou, I muttered. It's simply not fair. She put me in this situation, and there is nothing I can do. I have to tolerate that in order to keep my daughter and my home. I paced around the office. Now I know why some men lose it. Don't even joke about it. Tom Lou replied shortly, I understand you're upset, but if anything happens to her, I don't want to testify that you made threats. Okay? I understand. I agreed. I would not do something like that. I simply feel like she's an albatross around my neck. I looked out the window and grumbled. A new billboard featured Carol and Ted Stevenson with the tagline, Birmingham's choice for the 620 News. See, I pointed it out to Lou. I can't get away from her, even here. Lou looked at the placard and got an idea. How desperately do you want to get out of this mess? He asked. Not desperate enough to use violence, I replied strongly. No, not that. But I've got an idea. He said we spent an hour talking with me, stating it was insane and wouldn't work. Lou repeatedly asked, how much worse off would you be? I finally recognized I was trapped and needed to try something. Okay, Lou, I'm in, I said. Finally, I left the office with determination, but also with doubts. Could I lose my daughter for this plan? Perhaps it was preferable to live as a betrayed guy. As I picked up Susan and prepared dinner, I kept thinking. I turned off the television, able to see Carol and Ted on the news. Carol unexpectedly returned home early. She tucked Susan into bed, and I heard them laughing and reading stories. It seemed like old times. Carol came downstairs, and I thanked her. She misses you, particularly at night time. I know, she replied softly. I missed her too. I hoped whether she was reconsidering her decisions, but my dreams were shortly dashed. I'm going on vacation next week, she added. Don Sanchez proposed it because we had such great ratings. I will check with my supervisor tomorrow about joining you, I said, hoping to seem eager. No, Tom, Ted, and C are going away alone. We're weary of sneaking around and want to spend time together without worry. I was stunned. She proceeded. Mrs. Allop will keep Susan all week. You only need to drop her off and pick her up. If you need to reach me, this is where I will be. She handed me a document. We'll be back on Sunday, and things will return to normal. She kissed my head like a child and said thanks for taking care of everything. Honey? Then they went to bed. My God, I thought it was the most humiliating experience of my life. I was shivering with rage and realized I needed to reclaim my dignity. Lou's insane plan seemed to be the best option. I left work early on Friday to visit Carol before she went with Ted Stevenson. I arranged for Mrs. Alsop to babysit Susan overnight so she wouldn't witness any conflicts. I checked Carol's closet and spotted her suitcases, so I knew she'd come home to pack when her car arrived. I waited in the living room. What are you doing here? She asked. Is Susan? Okay, she's fine, I said. She is at Mrs. Olop's. So why are you here? I intended to persuade you not to go away with Ted this week. I told her. She placed her hands on her hips. I told you I was having an affair with Ted. When we get back, it will be over and everything will return to normal. You just need to be patient. But how about our wedding vows? I will not. How about leaving everyone else behind? Those vows were made in another time. Nobody believes that garbage anymore. Carol said, angry, but this is infidelity. I do not want you to dishonor our marriage. I insisted, Tom, if I want to be with Ted, I will. This has nothing to do with you or me. She responded dismissively, but how about your fans? They would not approve. I reasoned, I don't care what others think in a year. I'll be leaving this village for a city. What people here believe, it means nothing to me. Now quit bothering me. I need to pack or I will be late. If you can't take seeing me with Ted, leave right now, she spoke coldly. I stood up and slumped my shoulders. I apologize, Carol. I apologize for everything I left and drove to the nearby tavern. I needed to relax, as I mentioned. This is my second beer. Lou walked in. Hey, buddy, he said. How did it go? I do not know, Lou. You have to see for yourself. I responded, feeling defeated. Not until I try what you did, he said, with a determined expression. We drank our beers and drove back to my house. Carol was gone. Lou sat at my computer and with a few keystrokes brought up the video we watched as Carol ignored my protests and explained her plans to Ted. What a cow. Lou murmured. Then he watched her dismiss her fans and mentioned leaving town. Lou's face lightened up. We've got her. This is better than we had hoped. He saved the footage on a flash drive and took out the covert camera's backup copy. He added holding up the drive. We drove back to the tavern to get Lou's car. He demanded I accompany him home for dinner. Eddie prepared a large meal. If you don't show up, she'll be furious. He warned. I unwillingly followed him when we arrived. Eddie hugged me and kissed my cheek. Whether it was friendship or sympathy, I appreciated it. I don't remember anything from the supper. I was just picking at my dinner, while Lou and Eddie exchanged anxious looks. Afterward, they brought me to the den, where Lou opened a bottle of wine. We drank until Eddie couldn't hold back anymore. Carol has made me really angry and disappointed. I'm not sure what to say. She always seemed so kind and loving. When did she become a selfish, promiscuous woman? Eddie exclaimed success has transformed her, and now she believes she can accomplish anything. She turned swiftly to face Lou. Look, please do whatever you can to aid Tom. I dislike taking sides and divorces, but this is different. Carol is out of line, and we need to assist Tom in keeping his daughter. She then fixed Lou in a searing stare. And if you're approached by any of those models or TV celebrities, you best say no, or I'll come after you with a butcher knife. Lou and I chuckled, but I wasn't sure if she was exaggerating. To prove a point, we spoke and drank all night, till I collapsed on their couch. I recall Eddie covering me with a blanket and rubbing my arm. The next thing I knew, morning light was flooding through the window, and I had a bad taste in my mouth. Lou lent me a toothbrush and razor, and I attempted to make myself presentable. Eddie had prepared a large breakfast, and I joined them at the table. My hunger improved slightly, most likely because my survival instincts kicked in. Lou grabbed my hand after we finished breakfast. Leave everything to me. I have a lot to do this weekend. Pick up Susan and get out of here. I'll keep you posted. He reassured Lou. I'm not sure what I'd do without you. I spoke truly. I hugged him awkwardly and went home. I had one more chore that I was not looking forward to. I located Ted and Mrs. Stevenson's phone number in our address book. When I phoned, Missy answered. Hello, Missy. This is Carol's spouse, Tom Bailey. Can I come over now and talk? I asked hello. Thomas, yes. Come on over, she said, seeming hesitant. Probably wondering why I wanted to visit her as I drove to her house, I considered what to say. Telling a lady that her husband is cheating is never easy. It was especially odd because I didn't know Missy very well, but she had to know. Missy attended the University of Alabama with Carol and me. She was in Carol's sorority, but she was 2 years younger, so we didn't talk much. I was surprised she married Ted, because she didn't seem like the type. When I arrived, She welcomed me and offered me a drink. I asked for water with ice since I was scared my mouth would dry up. When she delivered it, I took a sip and started. "Missy, do you know where Ted is?" I asked gently. "Of course," she replied. "He's been at a television convention all week." Why, she queried, a hint of concern entering into her tone. "Missy, I'm sorry to tell you that Ted isn't at the convention. He is having an affair with my wife on the seaside." I revealed it as delicately as possible. Missy looked like I had slapped her. "That cannot be," she complained. "I saw him off last night. He loves me. Carol was like a sister to me. She would not harm me," she replied, her voice shaking. She finally broke down. "Tom, are you certain?" she inquired, tears welling in her eyes. I sternly gave her the footage from the green room, and as she watched, her eyes turned red and she started crying. I sat next to her and stroked her back. "I understand, Missy, I know," I murmured softly, hoping to provide some consolation. Suddenly she looked up, furious that Carl had seduced him. If you had her under control, she would have stopped when she saw my surprised expression. "Tom, I apologize, you also lost your wife, right?" Her remarks reminded me of my anguish and loss, and I began crying again. We hugged for comfort. Finally, we moved away. She wiped her face and inquired, "What are you going to do now?" I explained the situation. Carol had put me in, particularly with Susan Missy, who had no children. Carol's effect over me was immediately apparent, and she clasped my hand sympathetically. "Tom, I never imagined she could be so harsh." Missy said, "What are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to file for divorce, but I want to be sure I don't lose Susan. It's best if you don't know the specifics, just in case you're not planning anything unlawful, right?" she asked. Concerned, no. However, if I succeed, both she and Ted will regret cheating. I attempted to smile to reassure her, but I think I failed. "How about you? Can you rebuild your marriage following this?" "I can't stay with him after learning how long this has been going on and how they spent their week together. Perhaps you should hire my lawyer unless you have someone else in mind," I offered. She offered a faint smile. "I do not know any lawyers if you use mine. It may save you money, since he already has all of my evidence." I gave her my lawyer's contact information. "Call him on Monday and tell him we're on the same page." She nodded and accepted the paper. "Missy, I need a big favor," I said. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. "Please do not tell anyone about this until you have heard from me. It could cost me the opportunity to retain Susan." She looked at me solemnly and nodded. "I won't say anything, Tom, I promise." I thanked her before standing to leave. "What are you planning to do now?" she asked. "I am going to pick up my daughter and take her out of town till things calm down." She wished me luck, and I did the same. We are both going to need it. I assumed I had driven to Mrs. Alsop's residence. Susan greeted me at the entrance and jumped into my arms. "Did you have a wonderful time, honey?" I asked. "Yes. Daddy, I had a sleepover, and we ate pancakes for breakfast, and I played with dolls." I thanked Mrs. Allop and told her that Susan would not be coming next week. She glanced at me shrewdly and inquired, "Is everything okay, Tom?" "I hope so," I responded. She kissed Susan's face and murmured, "Take care of her. She's like family to me. I'll pray for you." "Thanks, Mrs. Allop. It means a lot." I brought Susan to the car and belted her in when we arrived home. Susan inquired, "Where is Mommy, Mom? Needed to go on a trip, but you and I are also going on a trip. Where are we going?" "Dad?" she asked joyfully. "At Grandma and Grandpa's farm." She squealed and began dancing. Susan enjoys visiting her folks and seeing the farm animals. "Can we see the ducks and the small piglets?" She asked. "Yes, honey," I told her. "Let's get started." I gathered our luggage and we walked to the car. I pondered leaving Carol a letter, but ultimately decided against it. The trip to my parents' farm took a little over an hour. Susan slept most of the way when we turned onto the gravel road. She awoke and pointed to the horses and cows when we arrived. Mum and Dad welcomed us. Susan hurried into Grandma's arms, excited to see the animals. Mum led her to the barn, giving me a troubled look. I took my luggage, Dad took Susan's, and we went in. Dad offered me a drink of fruit tea from the kitchen. Its flavor reminds me of my childhood. "Okay, Tom, what is going on with you and Carol?" Dad asked bluntly, with concern in his eyes. "Let 'em go on a walk, Dad, and I'll tell you everything. I've been waiting for this talk since I called to ask if we might stay for a week." They adored Carol and regarded her as the daughter they had never had. I knew they'd be deeply affected. As we strolled alongside the fence, I told my dad the entire story. He remained mainly silent, but I could see the sorrow in his eyes. He gasped at times, and at the end his eyes were filled with tears. "I can't believe Carol could do this. She's always been so nice to us and such a wonderful mother to Susan. How could she have been so heartless and selfish?" He took a careful look at me. "Tom, could this be a misunderstanding or a joke?" I understand his denial. I still had problems believing it. I took out my phone and showed him the video from the green room. "Pay attention, Dad." When he took the phone, I reached over and pressed the arrow to play the video. He muttered to himself in a half-whisper, "I can't make out much of that, my God." I saw the image come into focus. Carol's practically nude body slipped out of Ted Stevenson's hold and began sliding down his torso. I seized the phone from him, and he stood, powerless. His shoulders fell and his face tensed. Then he grabbed me and wrapped me in a tight hug. Son, I'm so sorry. It really saddens me to see this. I can't imagine how you felt." He continued, his voice full of emotion. We stood for a few more minutes before walking back to the house in quiet. His hand remained on my shoulder. I went to him and said, "Dad, could you tell Mom?" "I do not think I can." He nodded solemnly. "I'll do it." He answered gently. When we returned, Mum and Susan were in the kitchen, having a snack. Mum became concerned when she observed Dad's expression. "Son," he said, "why don't you take Susan to the pond and observe the ducklings?" Susan sprang up and tugged my arm. "Let's go watch the ducks." "Daddy," she shouted excitedly. I nodded gratefully to Dad and took Susan to the pond. When we returned, Mum had been crying. She hugged me tight. "I love you, Tom, Dad, and I will be there for you no matter what." She spoke, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Mum," I muttered, glancing at Dad. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." I added. We stood there for a long time. Susan is unsettled by the silence. I turned to her and said, "Okay, Susan, let us go unpack and prepare for dinner." She took my hand and brought me into our room. I promised myself I would never lose my kid, no matter what. The next day, we went to the old Baptist church that Mum and Dad had frequented for many years. I was pleased to hear the familiar lines and sing the classic hymns. That evening, Lou called to give me an update on his weekend job. I understood how fortunate I was to have him as a friend, and how much I owed him when I tried to thank him. He dismissed it. "You could have done that for me," he replied dismissively. He understood what I was saying. Then his tone shifted. "Okay, Tom, are you prepared to put our plan into action?" he warned. "There's no turning back once we start." I paused to examine the hazards. Even if we accomplish, things may not turn out well, but Carol had humiliated me and put me in an unpleasant situation. I needed to fight back. "Lou," I said, "let us do it." Lou must have sensed my resolve. "If anything, Edie believes you're doing the right thing," he continued, lifting my spirits. "Have you got access to a computer?" I laughed. "Yes, we are not living in the 1800s. I responded. "Good. I will call you tomorrow with more information." He said, "Why not email me?" I inquired. Puzzled, "No, I prefer to keep this private. Please wait for my call." He insisted I checked on Susan and made sure she was sleeping in her new bed. Lou called mid-morning Monday. "When you have some privacy, go to YouTube and enter XY into the search field." He said, "Watch it and let me know what you think. Mum and Dad had taken Susan for a stroll, so the timing was ideal." I went to YouTube and looked up one video titled WXYZY Co-host. Carol Martin discusses her personal concept of love and marriage caught my attention. The traditional theme music for the 6-hour news played, but as the camera focused on Carol, her voice faded and a voiceover began. Carol Martin, a popular news co-host for WXYZ, was recently questioned about her thoughts on love and marriage. The announcer announced the screen transition to Carol, adding, "Marriage is an institution that has existed as long as human society. However, it is currently under unprecedented attack. I recognize those sentences from a WXYZ series about the growing divorce rate. However, instead of continuing, the voiceover reappeared. What are your thoughts on the sacredness of marriage?" Carol, the scene changed to our den, where Carol talked. Wedding vows were created during another era. Nobody believes that crap anymore. She continued, the scene froze, and the narration continued. "How about fidelity to your husband?" The voiceover inquired. Carol responded, "If I want to leave and hook up with Ted Stevenson, I will. That is what I desire." Ted Stevenson's visage appeared, leaving little doubt as to who she meant. The voiceover resumed. "What about popular opinion? Do you believe your viewers would agree?" The voiceover inquired. Carol answered, "I do not care what my admirers think. They are basically redneck dorks in 6 months to a year. I plan to leave this town for a big city. What people here believe is irrelevant to me," the unseen voice inquired. "So you intend to have an affair with Ted Stevenson?" Carol responded clearly. "I have already told you I'm going to have an affair with Ted, and you have no choice." The video cut to footage taken in the green room. Carol almost naked with Ted. The stage froze during an intimate encounter, and the narration ended. Birmingham viewers are left with one question. Where are Carol and Ted this week before fading out? The WXYZ news theme played, which showed an empty newsroom. I leaned back, feeling both triumphant and sad. I called Lou, answered, "What are your thoughts?" "My God, Lou, you are a genius. This will wreck her career?" I exclaimed, amazed. "Not bad. I'm proud of it," he added, enthusiastically. I felt a sense of remorse. Were we too hard with her? I asked, "Did she mention all of this to you?" Lou countered, "Yes, but no buts." He added firmly, "She has turned into a selfish monster, and we must show that to the world, Tom. You're a Rick guy. If you do not do this, you will not be the one to suffer, but Susan." "Do you want Carol to be her role model?" "You're correct, Lou. I admitted that there is no choice. So what happens next? Do we send out mass emails containing the video link?" I asked. "There's no necessity. This will spread itself. I will tip off a few gossipers, and it will go viral. Just be patient." He told me, "Okay, Lou, keep me updated." I said, feeling a little more relaxed. Susan and I spent the next few days at the farm, which we both enjoyed. Susan learned about farming and cooking alongside my mother. It was a fantastic week, introducing her to sights she wouldn't see in the city. Meanwhile, Lou called regularly to provide developments on Tuesday. He chuckled as he told me that Edie learned about the video via a co-worker. By Wednesday, it had been discussed at the COA's meeting. On Thursday, a media writer addressed it in the paper, leaving the question on everyone's mind. Where are Carol and Ted? Lou couldn't contain his delight. When he called me Thursday afternoon, I spoke with our media officer who handles CBC's WEO, and he stated the entire station is in a frenzy Other news outlets are contacting WXYZ to interview Carol and Ted about the footage, and the staff is at a loss for what to do. Don Sanchez is also out of town, so no one can reach him on Friday. Lou led me to a media blog story on Gawker.com. It covered the controversy sparked by the WXYZ anchors and referred to a YouTube video predicting that heads would roll. That morning I called my attorney to file for divorce and make arrangements for Carol to be served on Saturday at the country house in Gulf Shores where she and Ted were staying. I figured it was worth the money. I also called Missy to notify her and inquired whether she wanted Ted served at the same time. No, she responded. I'll do it myself. Once he comes home, I wish her well. Other local TV stations in Birmingham, jealous of WXYZ's success-scented blood. When they watched the tape, Lou informed a producer at the second highest-rated channel that I was filing for divorce, which they could cover as a legitimate news item. My lawyer confirmed the paperwork and disclosed where Carol would be served. The station decided to go all out, sending a film crew and lead reporter to Gulf Shores. On Saturday, Lou phoned me. Saturday morning, with more information, Don Sanchez has been contacted, cut his vacation short, and is attempting to return to Birmingham. The WXYZ employees are afraid. Lou encouraged me to watch a competing station's evening news on Saturday. Usually on a dull news day, the Carol and Ted story is the top headline. The co-host began with a photo of Carol and Ted in front of a billboard visible from my office window. Many Birmingham citizens have been asking where Carol Martin and Ted Stevenson of WXYZ are. We found them in Gulf Shores. The film cut to Hilda Riley, a reporter strolling down the beach towards Carol and Ted, who were sunbathing. Neither noticed until Hilda began questioning loudly. Carol Martin, Ted Stevenson. What can you tell us about your relationship? And the tale is spreading in Birmingham. Carol Brace and unclothed, quickly covered her bust while Ted attempted to conceal his Speedo with a towel. What are your thoughts on the video that has gone viral on the internet? Hilda asked. What video? Carolyn inquired, confused. The one when you told Birmingham Redneck that you came here to have an affair with Ted Stevenson. Hilda responded coldly. Carol sputtered, and Ted attempted to interfere, but a man in a suit appeared and asked, "Are you Carol Bailey?" Martin reflexively. Carol responded, "Yes then, Miss Martin," he murmured, handing her the envelope. "You've been served. Your husband also asked me to notify you that the locks on your house have been changed and you are no longer welcome there." The man walked away, leaving Carol speechless as she screamed. Anger flared in her eyes. That's the son of a cow. Ted, seeing the cameras were still rolling, seized her and led her to the lodge as she rushed away. The camera focused on her oil-slicked backside. The local announcer reappeared on screen. Carol Martin and Ted Stevenson had been missing for a week and were sharing a suite at a fancy Gulf Shores resort. Carol's husband filed for divorce and kicked her out of the house. We tried to contact him but did not obtain a response. They couldn't contact me since Susan and I were visiting my parents' property. Lou informed me that Carol had not trusted the BFF's claim that the locks had been changed and had gone to the property with Ted, only to discover that her key did not work. A camera crew captured her irritability when they arrived at Ted's house. Missy issued him with divorce papers. Also captured on camera, they ended up staying the night at a motel. Lou obtained additional information from our media manager, who learned from a contact at WXYZ why Don Sanchez returned to Birmingham and attempted unsuccessfully to call Carol and Ted, who had their phones switched off. Don was enraged, especially after seeing the opposing network's exclusive report. Ted finally called the office Sunday afternoon and Don directed them to the studio. They slipped in through the service elevator to escape the competing station's van. Don berated them for their behavior before firing them in front of the entire workforce. Carol yelled, "You cannot do that. We've got a contract." Don responded harshly, "Your contract has a morality clause which requires you to follow cultural norms. What we do in private is no one's business." Carol snapped back. Dawn, a practicing Catholic, got up during Mass this morning. The priest discussed the sacredness of marriage and the sin of adultery. He did not mention you by name, but he did speak to public personality that set a negative example. Carol recoiled, but Ted said, "Nobody knows or cares about us." Don sarcastically responded, "Obviously, you didn't watch the news last night, just peek outside the window." He pulled back the curtain to expose a defaced billboard that now reads, "Birmingham's choice for the 6th News is a strumpet." Carol gave a gasp. Don continued, "Your actions have dishonored the station and harmed our ratings and reputation. I have no choice except to remove you off the air and cancel your contracts. Have you ever watched the original Frankenstein Confused?" They nodded. Don remarked that you are the monster and the people of Birmingham are the outraged crowd. "If I were you, I would leave town as quickly as possible. I was really worried when I drove back to Birmingham. On Sunday evening, I departed late to avoid any potential confrontation with Carol or the media. On the way, I learned of Carol and Ted's firing. When I got home, the media had already left the next morning. The Birmingham News reported on a new controversy involving a city leader accused of theft, sending Ted and Carol's tale to the back page. Nobody cared about my reply anymore. I took Susan to Mrs. Alsop's home. She greeted Susan pleasantly, and Susan dashed off to play. Mrs. Olop offered me a compassionate look. "Tom, I was really upset to hear about everything. I hope you and Susan are well." "I thank," but wasn't sure how things would turn out. It was telling. She made no mention of Carol at the office. Everyone was cordial, but everyone seemed to shun me except Louis. He hugged me tight. "You are a genius. I told him you were the master of viral campaigns. It turned out better than we expected," he claimed. "The only disadvantage is that we won't be able to tell anyone what we accomplished." "That's good." I said Carol would figure out who was behind it and pursue me. "I do not want you caught in the crossfire," to my amazement. My lawyer called at the end of the week to inform me that Carol had decided not to dispute the divorce, but why I asked. She claimed she would fight me. Her lawyer talked her out of it. He stated that she intended to counter-sue for breach of privacy, but the legal issues were too cumbersome, and she isn't popular now. No sympathetic jurors. What about Susan? I asked. Carol claimed she tried to take her. Carol is unemployed and has no prospects. No judge would grant her custody. She is leaving town and relinquishing custody in your favor. She just wants to grab her items before leaving and talk to you. If she signs the documents, I can speak with her before she goes. I agreed. We scheduled it at the end of the week. I got nearly everything I desired. No, this is not true. What I really wanted was to return to my former life, but it was impossible. At least I had my daughter. That was what mattered most. Lou, Edie, and I had together. The following night, to celebrate, Susan came to visit and slept on one of their beds as we spoke. I brought some champagne to toast my buddies. Edie raised a drink to us. She responded, "I thought your skin was insane and would blow out in your faces, but you," she saluted me, "we are battling for your young child, and you, my beloved spouse, were confident you can manage it. Thank you for battling and winning against the odds." Cheers, Lou and I agreed in unison. Before we wrap up everything, I felt compelled to check on Mrs. Stevenson. She was an innocent bystander, caught up in the chaos, and she may have suffered the most. I felt horrible about involving her, even though it was necessary, And Ted was the true culprit, unlike myself, miss. He hadn't seen it coming. I called her, and she invited me to lunch, demonstrating that she did not keep grudges. We met in a quiet bistro. After we ordered, I inquired about her well-being. Not well, Tom, she claimed. One day I'd be blissfully married to a TV host. The next, I'm divorcing a liar who humiliated me. I understand, Missy, this seems like a horrible soap opera. I sympathized. She inquired about my status with Carol, and I disclosed the outcome of our divorce. Good, she remarked vindictively. She received what she deserved. What about Ted? I asked. That coward left town without confronting me. He instructed his lawyer to give me whatever I wanted. I'm not sure where he is, and I don't care, except I keep waking up and grabbing for him. She added, crying. Are you doing okay? Financially, I asked. Yes and no. He left me the house, but it's too huge, with a large mortgage. Ted is required to pay alimony, but I'm not expecting it. Finding a new career for him will not be easy, I believe. I will move in with my parents, get a job, and restart my life. This isn't how I imagine things. She remarked sadly. I felt bad for her. She was a lovely lady who did not deserve this. I begged her to keep in touch and tell me where she was. I liked Missy and hoped she'd make it through. The only thing remaining was Carol's visit, which I was not looking forward to, with the popularity of our viral video. My earlier wrath dissipated. I'd regained some dignity. I no longer wanted to fight Carol or brag. I decided to do something nice for her and have Susan there when she arrives. Carol exited the SUV and leased a moving truck to transport her possessions. She frowned, but when I let Susan run to her, the frown faded away, replaced by a grin and joyous tears as Susan held her. Carol looked up and muttered, "Thank you." They played together for a long time. The visit was meant to last an hour, but I ignored that. Once I chose to have Susan present, Susan showed and told her mother everything. Carol advised her, "Go to her room and play. I will be up shortly. Baby daddy, and I need to chat first." Carol looked at me irritated after Susan had departed. "Thank you for that. I did not expect you to let me see her." I just nodded. Carol's mood changed. You used a private conversation to ruin me and make me a laughingstock. How could you do that? I exhaled. Carol, I do not want to fight anymore. Neither of us will win. She snapped. That's easy for you to say. You sacrificed my work, family, and future to protect your ego. Carol, I stated I wouldn't fight, but think about it. None of this would have happened if you hadn't followed your own desires without concern for others. You brought this upon yourself. Carol began to respond, but Susan interrupted, asking when she'd come upstairs. Carol looked at me and then went upstairs to Susan. Carol packed her belongings while talking to Susan after they had played in her room. I overheard cheerful chatting from downstairs. Finally, Carol returned with her baggage. Susan is following. Carol knelt in front of Susan and said, "Mum needs to leave. I'll be residing in another state, so I won't see you every day, but I will pay a visit I can, and we can talk on the phone and via video call as often as you want." Susan quickly shouted out, "No, Mommy, I don't want you to leave." She clutched to her mother like she was the sole life raft in the ocean. Carol lifted her, embracing her tightly and attempting to comfort her. "It's all right, doll. I will see you shortly, and we'll have a fantastic time." She stepped over to me holding Susan. "Now be a nice girl for Dad. Susan, I love you." Do not forget that Carol scooped up her baggage and approached the door. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she turned away. She loaded her things into the car, waved briefly, and drove away. I hugged my screaming daughter. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I was losing my wife, and Susan was losing her mother. Finally, I set Susan down. "Listen," I said, "I've got an idea. What, Daddy?" she asked. With tears in her eyes, why don't we go to the park and view the ducks? Maybe even buy some ice cream. Would you like that? Yes, she said. And Daddy, can we feed the cones to the ducks? Of course we can, I replied, happy to have distracted her. I knew she'd miss her mother, but I assumed young children were stronger. I hoped I could adapt to the upcoming week. I needed to adapt much more. Late one night, my supervisor summoned me to his office. Tom, you've done an excellent job, and we appreciate your contributions to the agency. I was waiting for them, but I knew what was coming. However, the situation with your wife is affecting our clients. They ask if you are Carol's husband, which has an impact on them. Our relationship with WXYZ is also strained, and they are an important media outlet for us. Are you firing me? I asked bluntly. Absolutely not, he replied. However, we believe it is best if you seek employment elsewhere. How much time have I? I snapped, take what you need. I will write you a glowing letter of recommendation. It wasn't fair, but there was no sense in burned bridges. I shook his hand, assured him. I understood and thanked him for his recommendation. Then I went to Lou's office. What up, buddy? He asked. I was just fired. I told him the supervisors believe it is best for me to leave. This is nonsense, he exclaimed. I'm going to tell them what I think. I guided him back to his chair. You aren't doing anything. I knew it was risky when I first started. You have already done too much for me. He was unhappy, but he calmed down. We ended our conversation with me promising to come over for dinner on Saturday with my 4-year-old friend. Then I returned to my office and updated my resume. I realized Carol and Ted's affair had left me with damaged goods in the area. Everyone liked me, but nobody wanted to hire me. It was time to expand my search. I eventually returned to my old agency in Mobile, where the scandal had not followed me, and they appreciated my big city experience. I had to sell my house in Birmingham, and despite a good market, I received little money from the sale, which I had to split with Carol. Carol did not disappear from our lives. She began calling Susan weekly and quickly switched to Skype so they could see each other face to face. Meetings were not an option. Carol now lives in Santa Ana, California. Our video attack on Carol had a broader impact than anticipated, complicating her job search even outside of the Southeast. She eventually landed a job teaching journalism at Santa Ana College. When I reconnected with my old agency, I needed to find somewhere to live. The agency introduced me to a real estate agent named Marilyn Elliott, who turned out to be Missy Stevenson. She showed me several properties, and we caught up on what had happened. Missy moved to Mobile shortly after Ted left to pursue a career in residential real estate. When I discussed Susan's need for a preschool, Missy became excited and offered to help with that, as well as other children's activities. I enjoyed our conversation and invited her to supper to talk about the houses. She was always pretty much like the girl next door, and I found her approachable and easy to chat to, unlike the TV personalities I was used to. She advised a moderately priced house, which shocked me when I inquired why. She said that it was where she wanted to live. Her honesty endeared her to me. Missy and I married and settled into the house she preferred. I was apprehensive about how Susan and Missy would get along, but my concerns were misplaced. Missy had desired a family ever since she married Ted, but he refused, feeling that having a kid would jeopardize his job. She and Susan formed an instant bond. Susan even began calling her Missy Mom, which eventually became just Mom. That summer, we flew to Los Angeles so Susan could see Carol, Missy, and I had planned to go sightseeing in Los Angeles. Susan lived with her mother for a week. I was worried to bring this up with Missy because she dislikes Carol, but she thought it was a fantastic idea. She appeared more secure in our marriage and mature about the issue than I had expected. We arrived at John Wayne Airport, where Carol waited for us, despite seeing her frequently on Skype. I almost didn't recognize her in person, given her short haircut and work dress. Susan suddenly grew shy, holding to Missy's waist and concealing her face. Missy gently nudged her towards Carol, murmuring encouragement. Susan eventually moved hesitantly up to Carol, where she ran and hugged her. Carol burst into tears of joy, which originally confused and disturbed me. "Susan, I'm really glad to see you." Carol reassured her, and the two hugged closely. Carol looked at Missy and me and said thank you. Susan stopped to view objects in a store display as the four of us made our way to the baggage claim area. Carol turned to face us. "I understand we don't have much time, but I'd like to apologize. I've done a lot of thinking in therapy over the last few years. I understood who I had become in my quest for celebrity and how much I had wounded those around me. Particularly you two. You're probably not going to forgive me, but I hope you don't despise me." Missy and I looked at one other, then at Carol, and let go of a lot of previous hurt. Following our holiday, I contacted Birmingham one evening. We responded and chatted. Before he got on the phone, I asked to talk with Lou. I gave my pitch. "You took a chance with me once. Will you try it again?" I inquired, feeling a sense of hope. "What exactly are you talking about?" "Tom," he answered, perplexed. "Quit your work, move here and open an advertising agency called Bailey and Faraday. What say you?" I proposed, holding my breath. Lou responded, "Only if we call it Faraday," and Bailey we chuckled and began planning. Lou was dissatisfied with his previous employment and desire to change, so my call arrived at the perfect time. We relocated Lou and EDI to Mobile with Missy, assisting them in finding a lovely home nearby, even refusing a commission to make things simpler for them. We presented to a potential customer shortly after launching our agency, and he appreciated our approach. "I want to stand out. Can you guys create a viral campaign?" he inquired, seeming curious. Lou and I grinned at each other. "Yeah," I said. "Confidence is increasing. We can manage anything." Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe. If you haven't already, also write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.